Hi, this is Trevor Conquergood. Welcome to this week's R&K Software Club's video of the week. And the topic for this week is a cool type of stitch called the spiral satin. And so what you can see here are my initials, TC, done in a spiral satin. And for an extra little added twist, I turn them into rainbow spiral satin using the rainbow tool if you have it. I guess that's one of the add-on programs that you can get. If you don't have it, you can at least give it a try. Use help and demo mode, and there you can try any of the Floriani programs, and Rainbow is one of the latest ones. It adds this cool rainbow tool up here. We'll get to it, but first the main tool I want to talk about is the spiral satin. That's found down here at the bottom. And so to go ahead and get started, let's first of all just open up a piece of custom artwork, one of our shapes, and so it can be any shape that you want. There may be some things that we can learn about the shapes and what will work well with the spiral tool, but generally speaking, it's down here in what are our satin path. You've got your regular satin, and you've got a jagged satin, and color blended satin, and right here, spiral satin. Also in here, gradient satin, as well as fancy satin, contour satin, radial satin, and auto satin. So go ahead and try them all. Probably the most popular is auto satin. Auto satin, click, instant results. It creates a satin fill, so meaning, generally speaking, a satin fill means it tries not to put stitches through the middle, so just stitches on the outer edges. Only this shape is kind of large, and so what's happening is the software is doing a random split. Let's just select that and look at the properties box. So it's a satin fill, yes, density of 0.5. It's going to have some underlay. It looks like it has a parallel underlay. But it's over here on this tab where it says a random split type. I mean, if you turned that off and said no split, yeah, that might seem fine, but look at the stitches look like they disappeared. Now, if I turn off 3D, they didn't actually disappear, but notice now that they look like a dashed line as opposed to a solid line. And that is telling you that the distance from one needle penetration to the next is probably too long for your machine to stitch. In fact, if you measure where the kind of change happens, it's like almost half an inch. If you do it in metric, I believe it'll be around 12. So let's just see. Oh, I'm trying to be accurate. So when I click and drag, yeah, see 11.7 right at the 12 millimeter mark. That's a physical limit. The machine is not able. It needs to have, and so what happens is it puts jumps in between the stitches. And some machines will read that as thread trims and leave the stitches out. And so this is why when we make a satin stitch that's extra wide like this, the software shows it as a gap because it's too long for your machine to stitch it. Now, originally, the parameters were set on a satin, but we were allowing it to split, right? So you can have a middle split, absolute split, percentage split, and the random split basically allows the software to randomize it so that, if I try like a middle split, you'll see that it makes a very defined line where it splits the program. Either way, it's splitting it based upon a distance. So you have a minimum stitch length and a maximum. And if your maximum is 7, then right here at 7, it splits it. And here, where it's longer than 14, it'll want to split it twice, And so if I go to a middle split, a random split, then it simply doesn't put the split points in the same. It randomizes them. Anyway, so that gives, and I mean, a complete alternative to that is to use a pattern fill. So all of this said, we really kind of are off track because what we really want to talk about is the spiral satin. But to get to be using spiral satins, you need to understand how this tool works. And so we clicked on auto satin, and notice if I click on the shape tool that the software has put in all of these inclination lines for me. And notice the funny one here at the end. It's on a bit of an angle, and notice how the stitches have turned to meet that. So if you're like, why the heck did it do that? Well, take control of that, move those points, and now it won't, turn. Or maybe this is an effect. Maybe this was the elephant's nose, and we really wanted the stitches to turn to give the correct, sort of realistic dimensions of the thread. And so you are in control of all these inclinations. You can move them. You can right click and delete them. You can right click and add new ones. And there really are no correct inclinations. However, recognize what I'm doing right now is going to be hard for the thread to follow all of those inclinations. And I guess it's kind of a bit of a seesaw kind of effect, because I've got it, leaning to the right, then leaning to the left, leaning back to the right. Well, notice how the stitches have to kind of fan out, to be able to put all of the stitches along this edge. They get kind of tighter on this edge. And in fact, if I turn off 3D and zoom in, the software will actually make shortened stitches to try and, I guess, minimize the impact of the fact that you've changed the direction so much. But just notice that if you smooth them out, it makes the stitching a little bit more organized looking and easier for the machine to fill those areas in. So keep all that in mind when you're working with the satin fills, that those inclinations really are some of the most important parts. Now, I'm just going to click on the artwork tool. And it's like an eraser, take away everything that's there. The alternative to auto satin is the regular satin. And when you click on, I guess, I don't know what regular, just satin is what it says. But when you click on satin, it doesn't immediately give you the stitches. And because the software is waiting for you to draw in at least one inclination line. And if you don't plan on having any other inclinations, you could, move on. Or if you were like, no, actually, I wanted one that went this way, and then I needed another one that went that way. And you can add in as many as you want, but the software will meet all of these inclinations with stitch directions and turn them to match in between. Now, when you right-click, it waits. It allows you to interact with the green. Where should this segment start sewing point? And you can make them the same, or you can make them different and put them wherever you want. Now, when you right-click, it will generate your stitches. So this is how the satin path tool works. Now, if you want to turn it into a spiral satin, you simply click on the spiral satin option and you'll get the spiral satins. And I want you to notice that the spirals are also affected by the inclinations that we just drew. If you recall, and I'll just turn on the shape tool again, we had ones kind of going at this direction and at this direction, and you can sense how that's affecting the spirals. And so if I update them and then click enter or hit apply, notice how it changed my spirals. And so just keep that in mind, that when you're working with the spiral satin, you do have some influence over the way that the spirals get created and the way that they're going to look. And so one of my favorite ways, first of all, spiral satin does require a little bit of a decent size column width. In other words, it's probably not going to look great on a little tiny, 1/2-inch tall letter. But you get into nice big scripty letters like the, the TC. How big is my C here? Take a look at it. It's it's almost a 3-inch letter. Lots of room for the effect. So what I did to make that was just simply went to artwork, true type font letters as artwork. So, in other words, don't have the software put the thread in it for you. Just get the letters TC. Select a, letter style. I went with like this brush script. But if you just want to do, a block type like Arial or anything like that, fine. If you've got the ability to make it bold or bold oblique, that might help with the column width. But when you say OK, and it makes you those letters. So this is what I'm saying. If the letters are just, how big are these? That's 1 inch here. Let's go back to inches. So it's 1/2 inch tall. And certainly I could click on this letter C and click on auto satin and get a nice quick, result for the stitching. Same thing, auto satin it. So now if I want to do spiral satin, I just click on spiral satin, and it's going to put spirals, but because this shape is so small, it's really not a very successful result. And you can sense that. Now, maybe you're worried that it's the inclinations, and so you look and say, well, there's an awful lot of inclinations in here, so, I don't know if that's the problem or not, but what I'm telling you is it's the size. It's if I just take this letter C and make it be bigger, so it isn't actually turning out too bad after all. It's just, so I guess what I want to say is spiral satin's not meant to be something in a really small column. It needs some space to do this sort of spiraling effect. So that would be the first thing I would say. The next thing I would say is I'm not sure that having all that many inclinations, it can cause some kind of weirdness to the results at times. And so sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually use the spiral satin tool or the auto satin. Like, in other words, don't use auto satin. If you click on spiral satin and then just put in, now, if you don't put in enough, you'll notice it, right? If you're thinking, okay, surely that's enough. Right click, entry, exit. They're fine where they are. Fine. Right click again. And so it puts the stitches in. But you'll find at times that if you don't have enough, and here it's like at the end, it's obviously getting confused because it's staying on this inclination. If I was to right click and say add inclinations and put another one here, look what it does. It helps it understand. So if I add in an inclination, the direction of that inclination affects the spirals and how many you're getting and at what direction they're going. And so it's interesting to note also the entry point and the exit point can matter as well, because, for example, if the entry point was over here, then the software is going to walk down the center of the letter C. So a lot of times when I do this sort of spiral satins, I usually try and make it so that they start kind of at one end and finish at the other end, and it cleans up any of those little extra kind of walking around lines. Now, here I can sense some kind of funniness. I've put it over here, and there's a weird shape here, stitch. And so what I'm going to say is let's play with the, maybe it's if I can move the inclination closer to the end. Yeah, so it just wanted me to give it a little bit more information. Let's see here. So don't be afraid when you're working with the spiral satin to come in and kind of adjust. Look how I can just get it perfect if I just, I don't know, there's no correct way to place them other than moving them seems to affect the stitching, and when you get it to where you love it, then you're good to go. So that's the one thing with spiral satin that I thought would be kind of fun. When I did the one that I had the kind of finished results of, I used a script. And the script gave a little bit more room for, it kind of gave it a little bit more flair, if you will. So when I was choosing, I chose the brush style script. The one thing I'll say, and brush is nice because it doesn't have too much of this. Let's go with italic bold. So when I say OK and OK, we get the T and the C. Now, notice they're tiny again. I brought them in. They're, about half an inch tall. Doesn't mean you can't try and do the spiral satin, but as you saw, there's really not enough room for it. And so I don't know if you have to have 3 inches, but, maybe 2 inches. I could probably figure it out, but there's probably a bit of a distance. Like if it isn't so far across the column width, it's going to have a hard time, and that's 0.18 of an inch. What's that in metric? 4 or 5 millimeters across. So what makes a nice satin column would make a nice spiral stitch. What makes a really skinny satin column, probably not enough room to really do a nice job on the spiral. So when I go to do this TC, right away, my instincts say, I wonder how it's going to handle the wiggle around the top of the T. And for that matter, I'm zeroing in on the C and going, boy, what's going on there? Before we even do this, let's just select that letter and go to shape mode and take a look and see, like, this is actually crisscrossed lines here. You can see that the software has made it, the way the True Type font was made had a little bit of a loop in it. Now, I'm going to hit undo and put it back to where it was. Oh, that's too many undos. One more. So, okay, can it handle that? Well, yes, but maybe not. So let's find out, right? So you click on your select tool to select your shape. Click on your spiral satin. So, okay, let's give it some inclinations. Let's put one here. Let's put one down here. One out here, maybe one over here. Is that enough? I don't know. Let's try that. Right click, set your entry and exit points, and right click to finish. So right away, something's going on up here. And my feeling is that it's about, the corner, the crazy corner. And at this point, I'm like, I don't even think that's going to be an important factor. We don't need it. Maybe the easiest thing to do is just to select all of those nodes and delete them and hit enter. Okay, so didn't kind of fix it, did it? So then I'm thinking, and by the way, I do know that will make it smoother. So here, let's leave those in because that wasn't why it was weird. So they're all back just in case that matters. So probably what we needed is more inclinations. So let's give it another inclination right here. So now we've got the stitching kind of going how we want it to. And notice how it's just conveniently not trying to fill in that little stitch there. Now, if you started to get inclinations drawn in there, that would probably affect it. So if you right-clicked and said add inclinations, and if you got one somehow in there, then it's going to go crazy. Now, maybe you like it that way. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but probably that's not what you had in mind. And so I guess what I'm really trying to tell you is play with the Satin tool. What I find a lot of times is I just go in, and if there's a nook and a cranny like that, I'll just smooth it out. It's not needed. It's not part of my... Now up here, where it doesn't look as organized as I might like, perhaps adding in a few more inclination lines will help the software to clean it up and give you some sort of, helps it know. So basically what you can do is get it to turn that kind of spiral corner in a more quick fashion so it organizes the sides of it a little bit more and more every time I add more of those inclinations. So, that said, you don't need a bazillion inclinations either. And sometimes having too many can even, make it more complex. So, like for example, if I take this letter T and then I just click on Auto Satin, that's a quick way. Now all the inclinations have been added by the software, but notice that it puts in a lot more than I probably would have. And now when I click on the Spiral Satin option, I'm not sure I like all of the results, right? First of all, to do it as a regular satin, it put a divide line in here. I don't know if you were noticed that before, but if I click back on Shape Tool and zoom in closely, see the orange. So yellow are inclination lines, but orange are divide lines. And the divide lines, so if I was to hit undo and undo again and undo again, there, back to the satin, you can see why it chose to put a divide line in there so that it would tell the stitching to go this way and then that way. And you can, in either way, you can take control of those things. So if you don't want that divide line, hover over it, right click, and say, so you can either delete the inclinations or delete that split line. And so when I delete that split line, now the software is going to turn around this area. And if we're planning to turn it, what I might want to do is allow it to turn a little more gradually, and that will make it easier for the software to form the stitches around that corner. So again, we're a little off on a tangent from spiral stitching, but really taking control of the Satin Path tool is such a great sort of powerful tool in the software for being able to create exactly the kind of stitch results that you want to. And so one way or another, now that I've taken out that divide line, if we go back to our spiral satins, it turns around there. It organizes a little bit. So now that one looks a little bit better. What about this side down here? I think there was another one over there that is orange like that. And so I'll go ahead and say delete that split line as well. And so now it's trying to turn away around it, but it's gotten to this area where the stitches are so, what am I trying to say, small. And here, let's delete a few inclinations and see if we don't just pull this last one down like this, if it'll fill into that area. And so it's not that I'm saying it's impossible to do the little nooks and the crannies, but the stitching doesn't look nearly as attractive as it would if I, and this is where I use my own artistic license and say, you know what, I'm going to go into shape mode and I'm going to delete that inclination and delete that inclination and then grab all those nodes out there and just delete them and change my shape in the way that it looks and try and figure out why this is still not kind of coming down to the point there. So, it's probably not liking, and this is one of those times where I was thinking, having too many nodes too many inclinations does not make this easier for the software. And so this is another time where maybe just clicking on artwork to remove all of everything, and then clicking on Spiral Satin again and saying, okay, look, let's just have one here, maybe one there, maybe one showing it kind of how to go around the corner here and there, and so on and so on. And then when you right click, it generates the stitching, and it gives, so not too many inclinations is not necessarily your friend, is sort of what I'm trying to say. Now, the last thing I'm looking at is I can sense right away that the start and stop points weren't set, and so because the red stop point is there, the software will kind of like double back, and probably more importantly is the starting point right here, and you can sense the run stitch. So it started, it does try to start where you set them. So if you move them to the actual end, it cleans up the beginning and the ending of your spirals a little bit more, and you'll notice them for sure. If they're left in the middle like this, then it's going to stitch to this area, then walk. Look, it comes from here, walks back down the center, and spirals back. So just like a lot of times, moving your entry and the exits kind of cleans it up, gives you that cool effect. Now, how did I turn it into a rainbow? And that was a little add-on to the Spiral Satin. Basically, anything, if you have the rainbow tool, anything can be a rainbow. Here's my rainbow tool. It's a program. I know that it's come as a free gift when you bought thread in the past. Visit your local Floriani dealer and find out about the rainbow tool and how to get a copy of it. I know it's currently part of the expansion pack, so maybe you want to ask them about what that is. Anyway, if you click on the rainbow tool, it's going to show you everything that's on your screen, but it's only going to apply the rainbow to whatever I have selected. You have all these different themes that you can choose from, and I've obviously made a lot of them. I probably need to come and clean that up. It comes with about a dozen themes, things like princess. There's your princess theme. And so notice how the TC gets the different colors of the princess theme. And so if I say okay, then you'll now have a rainbow TC in princess colors. So I don't know if you enjoyed today's video, but I hope you did. It's an interesting look at a cool style of stitching called Spiral Satin. I hope you have a wonderful day. Until next week, bye for now.